It always starts with a look that feels like light. Not sunlight, stage light. It doesn't warm, it measures. It searches the contours of your face, the cadence of your speech, the posture of your uncertainty, and silently runs the question. What could this man become if I invested my imagination in him? It feels like intimacy because attention always does. But attention is not love. A spotlight doesn't love the actor, it loves the role. The glow you feel is the beginning of a casting call, and unless you're awake, you will audition without knowing you're on a stage. Carl Jung didn't write instruction manuals for dating. He mapped the hidden mechanisms we'd rather not look at. He called it the unconscious, not a spooky basement, but the engine room where patterns repeat themselves long after we've promised to change. One of those patterns is projection. We don't fall in love with another person so much as with the reflection of our own unfinished story shining from their face. In Jung's terms, women carry an inner image of the masculine, the animus, and men carry an inner image of the feminine, the anima. When those inner images are raw or immature, they don't stay politely in the psyche. They rush the stage and start directing the play. They push the real, complicated human in front of us off to the side and insist on the fantasy. Sometimes that fantasy flatters you. Sometimes it devours you. Often it does both. This is why the early weeks can feel like magic. Someone sees potential in you, and your nervous system registers it as oxygen. Finally, someone gets it. Finally, someone understands the version of you that you've been privately negotiating with. The someday you. Compliments arrive like capital. Your edges sand down with each approval. You become reliable to the script because the script pays well. But myths are jealous gods, and the first time you contradict the storyboard by asserting a boundary, by disappointing a fantasy you never agreed to, the production doesn't rewrite the myth, it recasts the actor. You're left holding a costume you never liked in the first place, wondering how the person who promised devotion turned into a critic overnight. Before you congratulate yourself for spotting the trick in others, recognize the trick you play on yourself. You didn't just get drafted, you volunteered. You traded the heavy work of self-authorship for the lighter work of playing a role. You let someone else carry your meaning because carrying it yourself is brutal. You accepted the sweetness of being chosen because the silence of choosing yourself felt like starvation. It's seductive to be adored. It's terrifying to be known, especially by your own eyes. Jung's antidote to all of this wasn't clever tactics. It was individuation, the lifelong process of becoming a whole person who can be trusted by the person in the mirror. Not a nicer man, not a more agreeable boyfriend, a man with a center that doesn't bargain. Individuation is not glamorous. It looks like demolition before it looks like design. It asks you to sit with the parts of yourself you keep outsourcing to romance. Your need to be seen, your fear of being alone, your addiction to applause. It asks you to stop rehearsing a heroic role in someone else's film and start doing ordinary work in your own life, keeping promises no one sees, telling the truth first to yourself and then to others, building habits that don't require witnesses to be real. At first, it will be mistaken for withdrawal. You'll metaphorically step off stages where you used to take a bow for being endlessly available. You'll say no to dynamics that flourish only when you say yes to self-betrayal. Some people will call you cold because when you stop letting their feelings drive your life, it looks to them like you've turned off the engine. Others will call you arrogant because mystery looks like arrogance to those who demand access without responsibility. What's really happening is simple. You are lowering the volume of approval in order to hear your own life. There's a paradox at the heart of this. The more you contort yourself to be chosen, the less you are truly chosen. Because the thing being chosen isn't you, it's a costume you stitched from compliments and fear. Masks are irresistible from a distance and unsettling up close. People can adore a mask for a season. No one can build a life with it. When you remove yours, the room will divide. Those who depended on your compliance will drift or rage. Those who wanted a person, not a performance, will step forward. Your job is not to chase either group. Your job is to stand still and let your life select who can breathe at your altitude. Okay, you might say, but what does this look like on Tuesday? It looks like saying you'll call after work and actually calling, because you chose to be a man whose word is heavier than mood. It looks like leaving a text unanswered when the bait is a fight designed to pull you back into the theater. It looks like declining the invitation to play therapist, savior, or project. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. I care about you, and I won't pretend I can be what your fantasy requires. It looks like walking away from the high of rescuing because you finally understand that rescuing doesn't build respect, it builds dependency and quiet resentment. It looks like building a life in 4 directions, not 1. Up, a sense of meaning that doesn't wobble when you're rejected. Down, roots, rituals, sleep, training, eating, work that don't fall apart when your feelings do. Out, friendships with men who tell you the truth and don't need you to perform to belong. In, attention, 10 honest minutes a day with your own thoughts before you look at anyone else's. None of this is complicated, all of it is difficult. Most people will avoid it for decades because they've been trained to numb, to scroll, to stay busy enough that nothing essential ever catches up. What about women? Not as a thesis, this woman, the real human being in front of you. She has her own unconscious. She has her own shadow. She has an animus that might be young and loud or mature and quiet. If hers is immature, she'll try to draft you into a legend where you become the ideal she cannot find in herself. The mind reader, the unbreakable father, the endlessly available hero. This is not because she is malicious. Possession rarely looks like malice. It looks like certainty. It looks like, if you loved me, you would. It sounds noble. It can wear the language of morality or romance. The cost is the same every time. Your center. Love her by refusing the role. Not through lectures, not through shame. Through a calm, repeated boundary that says, I won't betray myself to keep us together. If she has done her own work, you'll recognize it immediately. She won't crown you on the 3rd date. She won't flood you with praise to fast forward through intimacy. She won't need you to be the missing piece of a puzzle she hasn't tried to solve. She will bring her own center to meet yours. There will be tenderness, yes, but there will also be honest friction, because 2 centered people bump into each other's edges and negotiate in daylight. There is no script to memorize. There is no pedestal to fall from. There is a practice, attention, truth, repair. Mystery remains. Not because someone is withholding, but because each of you is an interior world the other will never fully map. And that's good. That is where respect lives. Let's talk about the body for a moment, because the body tells the truth faster than philosophy. When you are performing, your nervous system is negotiating for safety. You lean forward, speak faster, fill silence, explain, apologize for taking up space. When you are centered, your breath lengthens. You leave a little air in your sentences. You don't rush to solve emotions that aren't yours to solve. You stay curious without stepping over your own boundaries. This is not an act. It's a physiological signature of someone who has sat with discomfort long enough to stop bargaining with it. Other people feel this. They may not have the language for it, but their bodies register it. Calm that isn't numb, warmth that isn't needy, presence that isn't surveillance. Here's a trap to watch for. The high-minded martyrdom of calling self-betrayal compromise. Compromise is 2 adults with centers trading preferences to protect a shared value. Self-betrayal is abandoning your values to avoid the momentary terror of disapproval. They can look similar from the outside. Inside, they feel nothing alike. Self-betrayal tastes like metal and gasoline. It leaves residue. You'll justify it with phrases like, "It's not a big deal, pick your battles," or "This is what love takes." Be honest. The small, not a big deal keeps adding to a very big deal. You forget the sound of your own yes and no. You start waking up tired from a life that doesn't look hard but somehow depletes you anyway. Pay attention to that exhaustion. It's the invoice for the tiny lies you told yourself to keep the peace. If you want a practice that will quietly rebuild your backbone, try this. Keep 1 promise to yourself daily that no one else can see. It can be microscopic, 10 minutes of reading, 3 sets in the gym, a walk without your phone, cold water on your face, journaling 1 paragraph you don't perform for the internet. Why? Because confidence is built in private. When your word weighs something to you, you stop needing others to hold it for you. You'll find yourself less reactive, less hungry for reassurance, less tempted to trade your center for a hit of being understood. You are building an audience of one, the only audience whose applause you can carry for a lifetime. You'll lose some people. That is not a failure, it's a filter. You weren't abandoned for being too much. You were dismissed for being no longer easy to manipulate. That sentence will sound harsh until you understand manipulation is not always cynical. Most manipulation is unconscious. It's a choreography learned in childhood. I push here, you yield there, the dance keeps going, and we call it love. When you stop dancing, partners trained in that choreography feel confused and offended. They will accuse you of changing the music. In a way, you have. Stand kindly, not defensively. If there's a bridge to real connection, it will be built with bricks of mutual responsibility. If not, bless it and leave.